Welcome to This Birding Life, a podcast for birdwatchers everywhere. I'm your host, Bill Thompson III. This Birding Life comes to you from the friendly confines of Birdwatchers Digest, where in 2017 and 18 we're celebrating 40 years of publishing great content for birders. Sample our smorgasbord of content at birdwatchersdigest.com. This Birding Life is sponsored by three wonderful and wise organizations. Carl Zeiss Sports Optics. They are makers of the amazing Victory SF binocular and the new and equally amazing Harpy S spotting scope. Join the Zeiss community of birders at facebook.com/ZeissBirding. Red Start Birding is our newest sponsor here at This Birding Life. Red Start offers optics gear and expertise to birders and nature lovers, plus unbeatable customer service. Give Red Start a try at redstartbirding.com. Finally, the American Birding Expo is your opportunity to experience the world of birding in one place. Next September 21 to 23, 2018, in Oaks, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. More than 125 exhibitors from all over the world and from every corner of the birding market will be there. Learn more at birdingexpo.com. This is episode 77, Point and Shoot Nature Photography. Stephen Ingraham is a longtime birder and an even longer time photographer. He started taking photos back in the early days of film cameras and was quick to embrace digital technology both for cameras and for image processing. Steve has spent much of his career in the optics and photography realm, and when he found himself teaching dozens of courses on taking photos with point-and-shoot cameras, he realized what was missing was a guidebook on the subject. The result is Point and Shoot Nature Photography, a digital book that Steve self-published on Amazon.com. Steve joined me via Skype recently to talk about point and shoot photography. Well, Stephen Ingram, welcome to This Birding Life for the second time. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always.
Thank you.
So, Stephen, we're talking today about your new book, Point and Shoot Nature Photography, and I want to get into that here in a second. But before that, I'd like to give our listeners a little background. How did you first get into nature photography?
Well, it's an interesting story. I always tell people my great aunt was the photographer in the family, and I spent a lot of time at her house. She was the type of photographer who bought a new camera every 2 years.
Wow.
In the constant search for one that didn't cut people's heads off. So she had a whole drawer full of cameras of all kinds, from Kodak brownies to, in the end, I think her last camera was a Kodak Instamatic. So the drawer was full of cameras, and when I was at her house, I used to like to take them out and pretend I was taking pictures. So when I was maybe 12 years old, she took me to Don Frank's cigar store in Hoosick Falls, New York, because that was the only place in town that sold cameras.
Right.
And she bought a Sawyer box camera, took 128 roll film and a 12 exposure roll of film. So I went out and started taking pictures because I'd wanted to do it right along. Again, at that time, we didn't have much money, and so that was my roll of film for the year, till my next birthday. So I had to make it last, and I took pictures and then had to wait till my birthday to get it developed and then get a new roll of film. So I got a slow start in photography, but then in high school, I knew I liked taking pictures. My father had brought back a Olympus, a 120 roll film folding camera from Korea, and bought it in Japan. And so we had a good camera in the house, and though he never used it. So I borrowed it, and they started a new school that year, and I was a junior in high school, and or a sophomore, I guess. And they started a photo club, and I and 3 other really geeky people joined the photo club, and I learned to process black and white film and process black and white photos. Eventually, I ended up being the main photographer for the yearbook. I took all the undergraduate pictures and most of the sports pictures for 2
Wow.
years at and developed them all in the dark room. That was part of the deal. They got a dark room on the you know, on the promise that we would take care of, the camera club would take care of all of the processing and printing for the yearbook photos except for the seniors. So that's what I did. I learned a lot about photography then, and I certainly learned that it's something that I wanted to do and to be part of my life, and just went on from there.
And do you remember, was there a specific bird or image or a specific subject that was the one that really hooked you? Or did you just, were you always interested in taking pictures?
Well, I was always interested in taking pictures, and I loved because of the cameras I owned. I loved landscapes and close up stuff. And I always then when I got into birding, of course, which was much later in my mid 30s, I wanted to take pictures of birds too. But at that time, the equipment just, I mean, to take good pictures of birds at that time, you needed to invest a large amount of money in equipment, a good camera body and a good lens. I think I bought one of those 400 millimeter f6.9
Wow.
uh, lenses with a uh, manual aperture. You could get them, from the camera stores in New York for
Right.
$100 or so. So I had one of those, and that was my long lens. But of course, 400 millimeters for birds is not a long lens, and I kind of gave up on wildlife photography for quite a while, and just knowing that I didn't have the money to invest in the equipment that would make me successful at it.
Right.
But then these point and shoot super zooms came along, and for not a big investment, you could actually take reasonable pictures of wildlife, birds in particular, and that kind of swung me back into taking more birds and wildlife. Although I always have taken lots of landscapes and flowers and all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I want to get into that, the difference, the sort of the emergence of the point and shoot market. But I want to ask you this too, because I ask a lot of people who've been photographers for a long time. When digital started coming in, were you at all reluctant to adopt it, or were you one of the people that leapt on it right away?
I leapt on it right away. Well, actually, I made a deal with myself. I said when digital cameras got under $500, I would buy one.
Hmm.
And about maybe 3 or 4 years in, actually before digital cameras actually became cost affordable, I was doing digital photography with a digital movie camera, digital
Okay.
a video camera, and then capturing the frames. And I actually published pictures in the local newspaper using that method. But then digital cameras finally came down under $500, and I bought my first one, and I never looked back. The first digital cameras were, especially the point and shoots. You got an image that was somewhere halfway between an Instamatic quality image and a cartoon.
Right.
But I saw the potential, and certainly the potential to manipulate the image after you had taken it. I mean, I don't mean to do weird things to it. I mean to process it
Right.
effectively,
Improve it.
improve it. Yeah. So you had your digital darkroom, and I was that was the one of the original uh, image processing softwares, and I was an early adopter of that, and I've owned just about all of the available image processing programs since then.
But now you prefer to do your photography with a point and shoot. And can you explain the philosophy behind that and give our listeners a little bit about the difference between point and shoot and say DSLR, sort of the full size big cameras you often see out there at birding sites?
Yeah, well, I got into point and shoot, as I said, because they were the alternative that provided you with the kind of reach that you need for wildlife photography. Um, the first super zoom point and shoots went out to, I don't know, 400 millimeters, 500 millimeters. Then they got up to 600 millimeters, and then 800 millimeters, and then 1200 millimeters, and now there's one out that reaches 2000 millimeters.
Wow.
Yeah, so you really can be effective in the field if your main interest is birds and wildlife. And like to get anything comparable, to get the same image scale that you do with a point and shoot super zoom, you'd have to own, a DSLR body and several very expensive lenses. Like 600 millimeter Canon f4 lens is $12,000, whereas a camera that will essentially take the same image scales, in other words, the bird in the frame would be the same size, in a point and shoot cost, $300.
Right. But of course there is a difference in the the number of pixels, I guess you would say. There's the size of the image in terms of resolution.
The resolution is different, although until the big jumps in resolution in DSLRs over the last 2 or 3 years, point and shoots were keeping up pretty well.
Yeah.
At the time I got into point and shoot photography, the highest megapixel count you could get in a DSLR was like 12 megapixels, 6 even. And the point and shoots of that day had that many megapixels. And of course, there is a difference in quality because of the size of the sensor. Even though they have the same pixel resolution, same number of megapixels, you never get quite the same image quality out of a small sensor as you do, which is used in a point and shoot, as you do out of the larger sensors that are used in DSLRs. That's a fact. Now, if you look at the two pictures at the same size, I always tell people you need to look at photographs at a reasonable size or normal viewing size and normal viewing distance. So if you're looking at an image on a computer screen, you're not going to see a lot of difference between a point and shoot image and a image taken with a DSLR. If you're looking at even 14 by 18 print and you're viewing it from 4 feet or comfortable viewing distance, you're not going to see any difference. It's just, you'd have to get a lot closer and blow it up a lot bigger to see the difference between the best of the point and shoot sensors and the DSLR sensors.
Right. But for most of us, the point and shoot is going to be plenty. I mean, let's face it, most people aren't publishing, magazine covers or life-size prints or, coffee table books. Most of us are posting things to social media and emailing them to our friends. So why wouldn't I'm assuming your philosophy is point and shoot is like the perfect camera for the average sort of avid nature person.
Definitely. And it's so much easier to carry in the field than a DSLR body in a bag full of lenses. So not only do you get good quality images, but you're not burdened down when you're in the field. You can, have a point and shoot camera hanging around your neck or over your shoulder all day long and not notice the weight. Whereas if you're in the field with a full DSLR rig, that's your major concern is how am I going to get it from here to there?
Right, exactly.
And worse yet, how am I going to get it back?
Right, who's going to carry this for me?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Now, are there any special things that you need to do when you've got your super zoom camera and you're zooming it way out? I mean, do you use a monopod or tripod or anything like that for those long shots?
It depends on the camera, but most of the point and shoot super zooms have incredible image stabilization built in. And by incredible, I mean totally incredible. I mean, just things you wouldn't consider possible or a conventional photographer would not consider possible. The Nikon that goes out to 2000 millimeters, you can handhold an image at 2000 millimeters. And,
wow.
Conventional photographers will tell you that can't be true, but it is true. And you can handhold a point and shoot camera down to a 30th of a second. And the image stabilization is good enough so that you'll still get good results at even quite low shutter speeds and long focal distances. So that's not an issue. I do carry for my the camera I currently use, which has a 600 millimeter reach. I do carry a monopod, but it's more that I'm getting to that age where it's really nice to have a stick with me.
Right.
And my monopod just has a beanbag on top, so I can just slap the camera on top of it when I want it to be a little steadier.
Nice.
I don't really need it in most situations, but I do use it as a walking stick.
So when you go out with your point and shoot camera, and I'm assuming your binoculars, what else are you carrying with you? Your monopod. What else?
That's it. And
Oh,
a few extra batteries and an extra, memory card.
yeah.
That's my whole. I've been to Africa with that kit. I've been to Cuba with that kit. I've been to the Amazon River with that kit. So I'm almost totally unburdened. I can fit everything that I need for a day in in a little uh, tiny camera bag, really.
Right.
So it makes it easy to pack. I mean, when I go overseas, my camera gear fits in a under seat carry-on along with my binoculars and my CPAP machine and all the other electronics that I have to carry with me in the cabin.
Nice.
Because the camera choice is important, but the way you use the camera in the field is equally as important to my philosophy. And that is these point and shoot cameras have such amazing exposure systems built in now, that and focus systems and white balance and the whole works. So much so good automation that you don't really have to think about it in the field. You can just let the camera do its thing. Certainly, I don't advise shooting in auto all the time, but with a little bit of intelligent tweaking of the camera settings, using program mode 99% of the time, you can take picture after picture after picture and get the camera will give you consistent exposures, correct focus, correct white balance, the whole works. So you can just concentrate on taking the pictures, seeing the pictures in the field, and snapping them, point and shoot. That's the philosophy. The big advantage of that is if you're relying on the camera's automation to set your exposure and whatnot, then you're going to get consistent exposures day in, day out, any kind of situation. The camera will chances are, be able to handle it. So when you get back to processing at home, you've got these consistent exposures that allow you to set up, one or two presets in your post-processing program and do all of your processing on the fly in the field. When I go out in the field, I went to the Amazon, at the end of the trip, I was with professional photographers with big rigs. At the end of the trip, I had all my pictures processed. Well, actually, I always save a few to process in the plane on the way home. But other than that, I had everything processed that I was going to keep. I did them each day as I shot, or each evening after I shot. And most of the other people with me, they're still working on the images that they took in the Galapagos last March.
Right. Yeah. And so how do you get the images from the camera to your? I'm assuming you're working on a laptop to do the processing.
I'm actually using an iPad Pro,
Okay.
which is just a high-end tablet that's just as powerful as most laptops today. And I use Wi-Fi. When I'm in the field, I view the pictures I've taken that day on the back of the camera, and I can select on the camera which ones I want to transfer to my tablet. Then when I've selected 100 images, I just connect my iPad Pro directly to the camera. The camera has its own Wi-Fi station or its own Wi-Fi transmitter. So you can just connect it directly, and the camera sends those images that I've selected for processing to my iPad. And it does it, it's not quite as fast as putting the card directly, connecting the card directly to the tablet, but it actually saves time because when you connect the card directly to the tablet, you have to take everything on the card. You can't select the ones that you want to take. You have to
Right.
take everything. But when you select them on the camera, then you can only take the ones that you want to process. And that, to me, just saves a lot of time. It's very fluid and very, I just get so I can triage a set of the day's photos in not very long at all, and have them transferred in less than 30 minutes, and that's shooting 600 images a day.
Wow, that's great. So if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, this sounds really interesting, I want to get one of these, how much can they expect to spend ballpark wise, a range? And then what are some manufacturers that you think are are leaders of the pack in terms of point and shoot cameras?
Well, today there's two categories of point and shoot. The primary, the old existing category, and then the larger sensor point and shoots. So the small sensor point and shoots, you can get a good one for under $500. I mean, not good, an excellent one for under $500. And from any number of manufacturers, I think right this second, the Nikon point and shoots have the edge in image quality and image stabilization. But there's certainly nothing. I mean, I've seen wonderful pictures taken with the Panasonics and with the Canons, and you name it. Everybody makes one. Happens that Nikon has the long zoom, the 2,000 millimeter zoom, which is how I started using the Nikon cameras. But every year, new models come out. This is the one segment of the camera market that is still growing. The point and shoot super zooms. You can't buy a nice compact short zoom point and shoot anymore because nobody uses them. They all use their phones. And but you can still buy super zooms from all of the manufacturers. Then the other category is the 1-inch sensors. You're talking about a sensor that is essentially 5 times the size of the one in a traditional point and shoot camera. So it's about half the size of a micro four thirds sensor. It's so it's getting up towards a quarter of the size of a full frame sensor, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but the difference in image quality is marked. You can easily see, when you look closely, you can easily see the difference in image quality. These bigger, more expensive, they're more expensive. So because the sensor is bigger and the lens has to be bigger in order to reach even 600 millimeters.
Right.
But since they charge more for them, they can throw more money at the lens design and the internal processing engine and all that kind of stuff. These cameras cost anywhere between $1,000 and $1,800, whereas a regular point and shoot, as I said, will be under 500.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about a big jump in price, but also a big jump in quality.
Right. And what are some of the key components that you would recommend people look for when selecting a super zoom?
Well, the first thing to think about is how long a zoom you need. I mean, do you need that 2,000 millimeters? Are you willing to carry a camera that has, a big lens on it? Essentially, a 2,000 millimeter lens for a point and shoot is the same size as a 200 millimeter lens for a DSLR.
Yeah. And when you say millimeters, what is that measuring? Is that the length of the lens?
It's measuring the focal length of the lens.
Okay.
And it really, what it translates to is the field of view. A short focal length lens has a wide field of view, wide angle lens. A long focal length lens has a narrow field of view. So you're zooming right in on your subject. Your subject fills more of the frame.
Right.
So telephoto lens has a relatively narrow field of view, but makes things look much closer. So, and again, because of the tradition of photography, we don't talk about field of view, we talk about focal length. And it's just understood that we're really talking about field of view.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what are some of your favorite places that you've done point and shoot photography? Some places that you love going to every time?
Oh, I love to go to Central America, Honduras, Panama, Costa Rica are just wonderful places for point and shoot photography. The rainforest and the mountains of those countries are full of wildlife of all kinds, and birds, bright tropical birds, and it's just a very fun place to use your camera. Not much more fun than South Florida or even Central Florida. Just wider variety of birds, wider variety of habitats. So yeah, Central America is one of my favorite places. I've only been to South America twice, but at least northern South America is very much like Central America. And then of course I gotta say Africa, because every photographer, wildlife or nature photographer, that's the dream, is to go to Africa, and certainly you have opportunities for wildlife and birds in Africa that are not equaled anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. And then I want to follow that up by saying, is there an image that you've captured in your many, many years of point and shoot photography? Is there one specific image that you've captured that you're just extremely proud of? Like your masterpiece?
Well, there's always my favorite picture from the last month,
Yeah.
or
Okay.
or the
Fair
or the
enough.
last 6 months. But one of the great things about photography, especially if you're a bird photographer, is that you never get the definitive picture of the bird. You may see a bird hundreds of times, but and you may have satisfying views of the bird every time for those 100 times. But if you're taking pictures, then you're always going to be shooting that bird whenever you encounter it, because you hope for a better picture. Uh, so, so I guess my favorite picture, well, it's just because it's my favorite bird I've seen in the last year, would be the resplendent quetzal from Costa Rica. Just an incredible bird, and had an opportunity to photograph it from a ledge on the side of the hill at eye level with of the tree where they were feeding, and doesn't get any better than that.
Nice. So, Stephen, what was your inspiration for doing the book? Your book is Point and Shoot Nature Photography. And what was your inspiration for doing it?
Well, I teach the courses at birding festivals and photography festivals, all over the country. I've taught point and shoot nature photography, and at the end of the workshop, people always say, "Well, there ought to be a book about this." So I thought, okay, well, I've really got all the material. It's just a matter of setting it down in order, and finding photographs to illustrate it, or creating drawings to illustrate esoteric points and that kind of thing. It's just a matter of doing it. So I sat down last spring and set myself a goal that by August I was going to have a book finished and published. And today, self-publishing with Amazon is just so easy. It's all you have to do is have the book, and this once I had the book completed and finished and proofread and all of that, it was published in a matter of days, 4 or 5
Nice.
days. Yeah. So, and you can get, it's published obviously as an ebook, as a Kindle book, but also now you can have print on demand, so that people who want to order a paper bound copy can do that as well. So.
Right. And so I'm assuming the best place to get the book, other than coming to one of your workshops and buying it right from you and getting it autographed, would be Amazon, right?
Well, the only place to buy it is Amazon. And actually, I don't bring any to workshops because I have to pay the same price at Amazon as everybody else. So you don't get any author's copies with
Yeah, that's
Amazon.
right. That's right.
So, so, so when people want a book, I just give them the address at Amazon. If you just type in "Point and Shoot Nature Photography," it's the only book by that title, and it'll come up instantly. And you have, as I said, the option of a Kindle book or a paperback.
That's nice. And the author is my guest today, Stephen Ingram, and his last name is actually spelled Ingraham, it looks like. Ingraham. So make sure and check out a copy of Point and Shoot Nature Photography. you're out in front once again, Steve. I think I first encountered you many years ago when I was first with Birdwatchers Digest, and you were doing Better View Desired, about a newsletter about optics, and then which became, I believe, a website, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
Probably the first blog ever on the web.
I know. And if you want to hear a little bit more about Steve's history, we did an earlier episode. I couldn't tell you what episode it is, but if you search for This Birding Life, Stephen Ingram, you can hear that episode too. And so, Steve, it's always great to see you and run into you at birding festivals. And one of these times, when I get my point and shoot camera, I want to go out and learn some of the pointers that you've shared in this book.
Well, thank you.
Special thanks to Steve Ingram for sharing his time and knowledge with us. You can get a copy of Steve's new book on Amazon.com by searching for Point and Shoot Nature Photography, or visit Steve's website at lightshedder.com. Thanks and happy 40th anniversary to Birdwatchers Digest, the magazine for birders who love to read and readers who love to bird. Learn more at birdwatchersdigest-digital.com. Carl Zeiss Sports Optics is a longtime This Birding Life sponsor. They also make top-flight optics for birding. You can join the Zeiss community of birders at facebook.com/ZeissBirding. At Red Start Birding, we look forward to changing the way you see the natural world. Visit redstartbirding.com for the best in birding optics. The American Birding Expo is the world of birding in one place. Join us this fall in Philadelphia and experience the birding lifestyle for yourself. birdingexpo.com. That's it for this episode, folks. Please subscribe to the RSS feed so you won't miss a single one. And send us your comments to editor@birdwatchersdigest.com. That reaches me, Bill Thompson III. Until next time, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you out there with the birds. Laters!